From the moment we are born, life is full of questions, some of them small, such as, what am I having for lunch? Do you prefer cats or dogs? And would you like sugar with that? But there are also those larger questions which loom over us. What is the meaning of life? Is there a God? Why a duck? All questions that are near impossible to answer, and that will likely remain unanswered long after we are dead and buried. And one man who understood all of this was Tetsuya Nomura, a man who has been miscredited in many well-researched studies as being one of the Greek Socratic philosophers, mostly replacing Plato, who, to be fair, is hard to take seriously as he is named after a children's toy. Kingdom Hearts, Nomura's masterpiece, is widely understood to be one of the most important works of our time. Reflecting real life, it asks many questions and constantly hits the player with twists and turns. But to date, there is one question that stands above the rest, more important than what is in the black box or who is Subject X, and that is, what the fuck were they thinking when they made Atlantica and Kingdom Hearts 2? Who asked for this? Any fun? Who wanted this? Anyway, I'm just here to theorize on whether or not Ansem the Wise could be the Master of Masters. Now, I don't want to pretend that this video is definitive proof of anything, but I do think that I can propose a fairly interesting theory, and whilst I'm sure that I'm not the first person to come to this conclusion, I haven't seen Ansem the Wise's name come up a lot when it comes to who the Master of Masters could be. The first thing that I want to do is highlight just how large of a role Ansem the Wise played during the Darkseeker saga, since I personally believe that if the Master of Masters is revealed to be a character that we are already familiar with, then they'll likely have been prodding and poking around behind the scenes in order to push things towards the outcome foretold in the Book of Prophecies. Now, you might think that because something is already written in the Book of Prophecies, then that's assurance that the event will take place without any outside intervention. But remember that the Keyblade War between the Foretellers was also foretold in the Book of Prophecies, and that only occurred because of direct intervention from the Master of Masters, who purposefully gave them conflicting roles that turned them against each other. The Master of Masters may also have been responsible for distributing the power bangles amongst the Keyblade wielders, which in turn led to the creation of Dark Chirithy, and planted the first seed of doubt among the Foretellers. So I'll quickly recap everything that Ansem the Wise has done during the events of Kingdom Hearts. Firstly, he brought together the original 6 apprentices, including Xehanort and Luxu. Keep in mind that bringing together 6 apprentices is something which he shares in common with the Master of Masters. Ansem the Wise was also responsible for taking in Aiza and Lee. He started the experiments on people's hearts, which Xehanort would go on to hijack, and also seems to have been involved in the whole Subject X thing. He brought Riku, and by extension Mickey, to Castle Oblivion, and led the effort to hunt down both Roxas and Xion in order to wake up Sora. He returned Roxas to Sora. He destroyed Xemnas' Kingdom Hearts, he gave Aqua hope in the Realm of Darkness, he planted the data inside of Sora that would lead to the discovery of the hearts which lay dormant inside of him, and upon his return in Kingdom Hearts 3, he helped restore both Roxas and Naminé. He's also the one to suggest that Sora might be an unreality or some kind of fictional world, although really that has more to do with the fairy godmother than him, another all-powerful hooded character with an increasingly important role within the story. But if there's a reason that I'm not considering her as a candidate for a Master of Masters reveal, it's because unlike Ansem the Wise, she has not played an important role in the stories of all 3 main trios. I think we can all agree that Xigbar being Luxu was not something which they had in mind since the character's introduction all the way back in Kingdom Hearts 2, but instead, when they were looking for someone that Luxu could be, Xigbar was an obvious choice. He had been around a long time, he had this air of mystery to him, and he played a major role in the lives of many important characters, such as Sora, Xehanort, Roxas, and the Wayfinder trio. And if that is the case, then it could very possibly serve as a blueprint for them to follow when choosing who the Master of Masters could be. There aren't that many characters left who have played a major role in all 3 arcs of the Darkseeker saga. Obviously there's Sora and Riku, and I know people have their theories about that. Then there's a bunch of Disney characters, but I highly doubt that would make for a Master of Masters reveal. I mean, he doesn't have Mickey ears, and I just can't see it being Maleficent. Although, that being said, if the Master of Masters pulls back his hood and it turns out to have been Phil the whole time, then I will personally fly to Japan and kiss Tetsuya Nomura right on the mouth. Anyway, that only leaves 3 characters, Ansem the Wise, Xehanort, and Xigbar. I mean, there's also the apprentices, but whilst they were present in all 3 stories, they really didn't play much of a role in Birth by Sleep. Now a Xehanort reveal would just be lame, having the Master of Masters just be the big bad from the previous arc would really suck. And as much as I'd like to see the 4D chess behind Luxu and the Master of Masters being the same guy, I think it's pretty safe to rule out Xigbar. That just leaves Ansem the Wise if we assume that they're going to repeat what they did with Luxu and have the Master of Masters be someone who is important to every arc in the Darkseeker saga. Now, let's talk about black coats. There's a lot of them in Kingdom Hearts. It's actually what makes this line really funny.
But you always wear the same thing.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. This is how you pick me out of a crowd. I make myself easy to remember.
Okay, sure buddy, you're really standing out in that crowd. So the earliest that we see them chronologically is on the Master of Masters and Lushu during the Age of Fairy Tales. I don't remember if we're ever told whether this method of warding off darkness was an invention of the Masters or some ancient technique handed down to him, but I don't want to trawl through literally hours of mobile game cutscenes, so I'll just assume that we don't know the answer to that one. Either way, he has one, and so does his favourite child. I mean, I assume it's his favourite child. If I had 6 kids and 5 of them insisted on doing permanent 24-hour furry roleplay, then yeah, I'd also have a favourite child. In Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind, we also find out that the Master of Masters gave Xehanort his original black coat, although we don't actually know if he gave him enough to outfit the original 14 members of Organisation 13, or even the later 15 members of the second Organisation 13, which by the way, we give Sora a lot of grief for not being able to count, but Xehanort is like 1 billion years old and he seems to struggle with the most basic of 2-digit numbers. Personally, I like to imagine that the Master didn't give him all the coats he needed, and instead, old man Xehanort had to spend his time hunched over a sewing machine, slaving away to make all the uniforms needed for his little club. But whether or not that's true, most of the black coats in Kingdom Hearts originate from the Master of Masters, except for 3 of them, Riku's, Mickey's, and Ansem the Wise's, and wouldn't you know it, all 3 of those come from Ansem the Wise himself. Now, to be fair, it is established that before his introduction into the series, Ansem the Wise probably spent a good amount of time spying on the organisation. And whilst it seems unlikely that he stole them, seeing as how one of them is tailor-made for a 2-foot-something rodent, it's not impossible that he learnt to make them by observing the organisation. Now, the scene that I really want to focus in on is from Birth by Sleep. The scene is titled Blank Points, and it's the first time that we see Ansem the Wise wearing a black coat. It's a very odd detail, which I feel is really easily overlooked. Now, I guess I should quickly mention that Kingdom Hearts is not typically a franchise where every little detail is the key to a larger mystery. Sometimes stuff happens just because it happens. I mean, there's a point in Kingdom Hearts 3 where Riku just suddenly gets a haircut for no reason, and I honestly think that they just wanted to give him a haircut, and so they found the moment which made the most sense right between 2.9 and 3. Or, I don't know, maybe Tetsuya Nomura just doesn't want to give canon explanations for fashion changes anymore, since everyone made fun of him that time he undressed the mouse. That being said, I still want to go over possible reasons as to why Ansem the Wise might have been wearing a black coat in this scene. The first is that this may have been an attempt to create comparisons between this scene and the scene in 2 and Days where Roxas meets Xemnas in the Dark Margin on day 6. Both scenes involve a major figure being told about Sora by someone in a black coat, but the link is pretty weak, so I don't think that's exactly what they were going for here. The second possibility, and if I'm honest the most likely, is that Ansem wearing the black coat symbolises his acceptance of what he has become. This moment happens between his sacrifice in 2 and him starting to make his atonement in Dream Drop and then later in 3. Him wearing the uniform of his enemy could be his way of acknowledging that he is no better than them. The organisation ruined his life, and in his quest for revenge he ruined the lives of many others. But I think that can be true without contradicting the third possibility, which is simply that they put him in a black coat to make him seem more mysterious. In a similar manner to what they did with Xigbar, making him this weird mysterious figure and then later using that in the Lucia reveal. Or how they placed that weird machine in the ruins of Hollow Bastion in Kingdom Hearts 1 and later revealed it to be the Ark in Union Cross. Or Key. Unchained Key? I don't know, I don't understand how the naming of this app works. Either way, Kingdom Hearts as a series is no stranger to adding in elements that can later be reused and recontextualized further down the line. Now I guess that I should address the scene where the Master of Masters reveals his name to Xehanort, because it kind of seems like Xehanort recognises the name. But if that's the case, then it can't be Ansem the Wise because the two haven't met yet. But if this theory is correct, then Ansem the Wise would not actually be the Master's true name, but just a persona he uses. In fact, the Master might not have even invented Ansem the Wise at the time of their meeting. Now, I said up front that I wasn't trying to sell this as anything more than just a theory, but for this next part I'm going to ask you to really stretch your imagination, because I have tangential, and I mean very tangential evidence, that loosely links Ansem the Wise to the Master of Masters. However, I do want to talk about it because whilst I'm sure I'm not the first person to notice it, I can't find anyone else that's mentioned it. And whilst it is a little dumb, I do also think it's kind of interesting. Remember Recoded? That game that according to How Long to Beat took around 12 hours just to tell you that Xehanort was back? Something that Dream Drop would then recap, really quickly? Well, in the movie version of Recoded, there's an additional scene in which Maleficent implies a link between the Book of Prophecies and Jiminy's journal, giving us a connection between the journal and the Master of Masters.
It's finally clear.
What's that?
Why that world they call the Date Escape seems so familiar.
Oh?
A book? Known as the Ancient Book of Prophecies. It's said to be capable of transcribing events that have yet to take place.
No kidding. If we got our mitts on something like that, we could finally take over permanent-like.
Yes, considering legend has it the book can also conjure, making an entire world filled with beings and powers that have yet to exist.
Really? A book that could just make up a world? I don't know. That sounds like nothing more than fluffy pink kids' fairy tale stuff. It just sounds too good to be true.
Ah, but who's to say a fairy tale's not true? And I ask you, how does that differ from this world they call the Datascape? Don't you think it might just be worth our while to search for a connection?
Now what if I told you that I could give you an even vaguer link between Jiminy's journal and Ansem the Wise? This is what the Datascape inside of Jiminy's journal looks like. Do you see it? Alright, let me zoom in here. Do you see it now? Yeah, that weird pattern. Do you recognise it? It's the same pattern found on Ansem the Wise's Diz disguise. Although, to be fair, whilst this symbol is often used to represent Ansem the Wise, it tends to look a little different with longer sections coming out of the square, but it is still a vague connection between Ansem the Wise and Jiminy's journal, and Maleficent gives us a vague connection between the journal and the Master of Masters, so yeah, I think that's concrete enough. Case closed, end of video. I'll see you in Kingdom Hearts 4 for the inevitable Master of Masters Ansem the Wise reveal. Okay, fine, whatever, you want more proof. Better proof, so I don't know, they both have one eye. The Master of Masters placed one of his eyes inside of the no-name Keyblade, and Ansem the Wise covered one of his eyes whilst disguised as Diz. Actually, whilst we're on the subject, do you know who else has one eye? No, not him. Him, Odin, the guy from that mobile game you didn't play. Dark Road introduced a whole cast of new characters with names relating back to Norse mythology, which makes sense given that Sora has been using the move Ragnarok since Game 1. And doing this allowed them to introduce the character of Bragi without it immediately setting off everyone's alarm bells. I mean, most of us put together that it was an anagram of Brage, but because Bragi is an actual figure in Norse mythology, it kept us guessing as to whether this was a coincidence or a purposeful connection. And I know I'm not the first person to say this, but the Master of Masters also shares a connection with Norse mythology. In Norse mythology, the character of Odin gave up his eye in return for knowledge and a glimpse of the future, which is very similar to what the Master of Masters did, placing one eye inside of the no-name Keyblade in order for it to be passed down through generations and allow him to see the future. And Master Odin does play a fairly important role within the grander narrative. He trains Ericus and Xehanort, conducts their Mark of Mastery exams, and helps inform their general ideologies. He's also one of the few characters to actually make it out of Dark Road alive. All three of them, the Master of Masters, Ansem the Wise, and Odin, have trained a version of Lushu, and they all share the motif of having one eye. And also, telling someone that they will have to travel alone for hundreds of years, only to secretly be there every step of the way, disguised as their mentor with one eye covered, just feels like a really Master of Masters thing to do. Anyway, that's all I really have to say. If you're watching from the future and the Master of Masters identity has been revealed, then either I was right, and yeah, obviously, duh. Or I was wrong and this whole thing was parody and you're the idiot for thinking I was being serious. But yeah, I know I've made a lot of stretches in this video. Ultimately I just thought it would be fun to speculate, and I doubt anyone will watch this video anyway. It'll probably just fall into the YouTube void. Anyway, that's it. Bye!